I'm Kat. Thanks for joining me. I am here today with you to share an astrological snapshot of what's going on with the planets in our solar system and to give you an idea of how that might show up in your life. So what I'm going to do is jump over to a chart that I drew up that shows some of the aspects that are happening between the different planets, as well as the movements of the planets over the next 2 weeks. And then after I walk through what's going on astrologically, we'll jump into what's going on with each individual zodiac sign. So you can see where those planetary movements are going to be showing up and affecting your life personally. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on astrologically. Okay, so what we're looking at here is an astrological wheel that starts with Aries and wraps all through the different zodiac signs, ending up in Pisces. And then within this wheel, you see an arrangement of colors, which are going to be telling of which element they're associated with, the fire, earth, air, or water. That helps to see where trines and where squares are happening. And then you'll see little circles that have the different planets in them, and in some cases, a big line or a long line in the case of the moon, which shows the movement of the moon over the next 2 weeks. In some cases, for some planets like Venus, there'll just be a short line. That's the movement of Venus over the next couple weeks. And all of these lines are showing you the movements of those planets. So let's go ahead and take a walk through the stars and see what they're doing over the next couple of weeks. So first off, we have the sun, which is in Capricorn at 8 degrees on the day of the full moon. Now the sun is sitting here. Now on this day, it's in a trine relationship with Uranus, and the sun, which is our essential self and who we are in the core of our being, was in a trine relationship with Uranus, which is the planet of unexpected changes, and Uranus is sitting in the sign of Taurus. Now, Taurus is the sign of stability and where stability is in our life. So that is one area that I'm going to be focusing on when I go through the natal chart, or I'm sorry, the different zodiac signs and your rising sun and moon sign, is you'll be able to see where this energy is specifically showing up for you in your life. But overall, we've all been seeing a lot of shifts to stability in our world on some scale and in some form. So the sun is in this trine relationship on the day of the full moon. It's also in near conjunction with Mercury, and it's going to be coming into conjunction with Mercury over the next couple of days because the sun moves pretty fast. And so the sun conjuncting Mercury means that we are going to see how we see things, like how we describe the world, how we verbalize things and speak about things, which is our mercurial nature. We're going to be blinded by the way that we see things. We're going to be blinded by our own sense of self, and that we even have a different way of seeing things than other people, you know? And so there's going to be big changes. And what Uranus does is Uranus is a planet that creates changes in unexpected ways in areas of our lives that are rather stagnant. So it creates change by necessity, and that it's not a bad change, although it can seem, bad in some lights, but it's ultimately for the greater good because it's creating a shift in our lives that we wouldn't have gone forward to unless that change had happened. So there's some energy happening there. Now, over the next couple of weeks, the sun is going to move from 8 degrees of Capricorn to 22 degrees of Capricorn. It's going to be moving through this area here, and that's where it will be at the time of the new moon, is actually at 22 degrees of Capricorn. Now, when we jump over to the moon is in direct opposition to the sun on the time of the full moon, right? Because the only reason why we see a full moon is because we see its the sun's reflection on the moon's surface, and that's why we're able to see the full moon. Now, during times of full moons and new moons, we have high ebbs and flows of our emotions, similar to what happens with the tides on the coastal sea, with those times of new moons and full moons, there being the greatest heights of the tide, and as well as the greatest uh, depths of the tide. During that time, we also see those movements of waters within ourselves, and our emotional body is associated with the water element. So we will see, a heightened amount of emotion on the day of the full moon and the day after, as the moon is in that sign of Cancer. Now, Cancer is a zodiac sign which is all about our tribe, our mother, our sense of nurturing ourselves, our family traditions, our home. And so we're having an emotional aha moment and witnessing and reflection around what it is that's really important for us to have in the home, and where we need nurturing for ourselves. And so the moon being in opposition to the sun, it creates those times of reflection at its deepest sense. And during that reflection, we typically see things that are no longer useful for us, or that may be preventing us from moving forward in directions that we feel really called to move forward with. And so from the time of the full moon, when it is waning to the new moon and going dark from full, that's the time that we typically are letting go of things, having gratitude for things, giving thanks for things that we're having some sort of release around. And so as the moon moves through on its path from 11 degrees or roughly, Cancer, to 10 degrees of Capricorn, which is where it will end up in 2 weeks' time, it's going to be transiting different planets. And the first planet that it's going to transit is Neptune. And Neptune is all about karma, and as well as illusions, because Neptune rules the deepest depths of the water, where sometimes things perspective wise can seem bigger than they actually are. And Neptune is also a planet that is, the depths of the ocean, right? That trident that is the symbol of Neptune is, what King Neptune used as his staff. And it's the rulership of the oceans and the greatest, vastest capacity of water, and it rules Pisces. It's sitting in Pisces, which is its house by rulership, and it's coming into trine with the moon, which is also water-based, which is in its natural rulership of Cancer. And so we're having some emotional understandings with ourselves and the path that has come forth, and what is important and essential to our being. And this is a trine relationship. It's it's easy in the movement that's happening. It's not a difficult, challenging situation. But in a couple days, the moon is going to be aspecting Mars over here in square relationship. And so we may see that, areas of our life that we want to move forward with, that we feel an energy to and motivation to put our fire to, so to speak, it's having a conflict of energy in regard to like how we feel about how things are happening. So there's not like, things don't feel as if they're happening in the direction that maybe our emotional body would desire. And there's this square relationship. Now, eventually, the moon, as it moves through this path, it will also go into opposition relationship with Neptune, which means that, we'll be in a time where we're really being self-critical about things that are happening in whatever area this is that has been triggered in our life. We'll also see, eventually an opposition to Mars, which allows for some reflection, as well as a opposition to Uranus, because the moon does reflect on all of these things in an emotional sense. And it's going to end up over here in this Capricorn position, and it will on that journey also aspect and come into conjunction with Venus, which is our planet that rules our relationships, and both intimate and friendships and work relationships and all relationships. And so the moon will be reflecting, during this journey of letting go on all of these areas of our lives. Now, when we go over to Mercury, Mercury is going to be starting at 15 degrees of Capricorn, and it will travel to 6 degrees of Aquarius. So this is the path of Mercury for the next 2 weeks. As I said, it's going to start in conjunction with the sun, which will give us some blindness around, perhaps how we're speaking to other people, and how we're actually seeing some situations. Like, we may not actually be able to perceive the entirety of a situation because the sun is in such a close proximity to Mercury, and it's blinding in a lot of ways. But the Mercury is going to be moving out of that aspect with the sun and gain a little bit more space and insight as this planet moves out of direct conjunction with the sun. Now, during that time, it's also not ironically, going to be crossing the path of Pluto, which is the planet of transformation. So how we see things, how we perceive things, how we describe things and talk about things will be greatly transformed. And then we also have Mercury going through the conjunction pathway of both Saturn and Jupiter. And so we'll be taking a new look at our sense of responsibility, and also that new sense of responsibility is ultimately what's going to help us as we move forward into the new year. So Mercury and that new light that we'll be gaining of understanding is going to come in the next 2 weeks. So if you feel like something is kind of blocked right now in communication, this will also be affecting those areas as well. Now, when we look at Venus, which is the next planet out into our solar system, Venus is starting in Sagittarius, and it is going to, in 2 weeks, end up in 4 degrees of Capricorn. So when it's during the time of the full moon and Venus is at 17 degrees of Sagittarius, it's also in a square relationship with Uranus. So there are some big changes and unexpected changes that are happening to our stability that are really affecting our relationships in a challenging way. And there's also a square relationship between Venus and Neptune, which is a situation where it's basically, the ways that we've always seen things or ways that we thought we saw things are changing and are shifting. And so it's challenging for the heart to be in this situation. Now, Venus is going to be moving on its journey into Capricorn, and as it moves into Capricorn, it's going to be coming into a trine aspect to Uranus. So we're going to actually see this challenging situation shift, likely with the help of this new understanding that's happening with Mercury. And so that's something at least that we can look forward to if you're having some challenges around changes and unexpected changes that have shown up in, the recent days around the time of the full moon. Now, from Venus, we're going to jump over to Mars, and Mars is over in Aries. So Mars starts its journey at the time of the full moon at 26 degrees of Aries, and then it's going to travel to 2 degrees of Uranus. Now, Mars at the time of the full moon is in a square relationship with Pluto, which means that and it's actually been in this aspect for some time. So it means that Mars, which is our sense of self and our sense of ego, like where we go from, little sense of self to capital S sense of self, that's the transformation and evolution of Aries of Aries and also of Mars. And so Mars is what gives that fire to our sense of self and our fire to our, solar plexus. It's what gives us this willfulness, and it can sometimes be seen as an aggressive energy, but it's also the warrior that fights for a noble cause. It's the one that's like, you know what, something needs to be done. I'm going to go out and do it. It's that fire of our own sense of self. And it's been in a square relationship with Pluto, which is all about transformation and change. And Pluto, for the last, year, literally since January 12th, Pluto has been in and out of conjunction relationship with Saturn and Jupiter, and it's just now moving out of that relationship. But Pluto is the transformation that's been happening in our areas of global infrastructure on a really large scale, and that's the mathematics of these 3 planets together. But Pluto on its own is a planet of transformation, and so because it's in a square relationship with Mars, we see this friction around our own sense of where we want to go and what we want to do with life. That's in a hard aspect to Pluto, which is like change that we didn't necessarily want. And at the same time, of course, we had Uranus sitting over here in Taurus, which has been bringing unexpected changes to areas of stability in our life. But so there's a lot of mathematics that are happening right now on an astrological scale, if you get what I'm saying. So this square relationship has been happening for a while between Mars and Pluto, and it's going to be moving out of that aspect because Pluto isn't going to be moving very much in the next couple of weeks. However, Mars is going to be moving into conjunction with Uranus. So when you consider Uranus, which is a planet of unexpected changes that bring shifts to areas of stagnancy, and you combine that with Mars, which is a lot of fire, there's big change and big, there's like, it's like something's already going on and changing, and then there's like another energy brought to it that has a built up constricted nature to it because Mars has been in this hard aspect with Pluto for, a good bit of time. So we're going to be seeing even more changes in this area of our lives, which is why I'm going to be focusing on this aspect when I go into the zodiac reading. I'm also going to be focusing on the aspect of Venus and its transition, and as well as how that combines with, quote unquote, the mathematics of, I don't know why I said quote unquote, just to be, I don't know, seemed appropriate, but to combine it with the mathematics of the sun and Mercury and how it's going to be, catching up and going into this conjunction or this like grouping of planets over here. So I will be focusing on that. Now, when we move from Mars, our focus of Mars, and go over to Jupiter, Jupiter is starting at 2 degrees of Aquarius and moving to about 5 degrees of Aquarius in the next 2 weeks. So it's, it's just moved into Aquarius on the 21st, which was part of the grand conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn. And that's such a notable event because for the last 200 years, these 2 planets have been meeting in Earth signs, which has brought a lot of change around infrastructures and money and agriculture and things like that. and they're moving into a different sequence where they'll be in conjunction in air signs for the next 200 years, which is part of what people have been referring to in the past as the age of Aquarius, because this shift astrologically brings in new energies from outer realms that are very different just by elemental nature than the earth energies that these planets have always met in for the last 200 years. So I'm going to be doing a whole video on this aspect and how this shifted and where that's going to show up in our lives, so that I can just focus on these two energies when I go into the zodiac, into the individual zodiacs. So just so you know to look out for that, that's going to be coming down the road. But Jupiter is in square relationship to Mars. And so it's, there's this sense of having a bigger perspective and seeing where you want to expand in your life, but having that restricted by what you feel like you're actually able to do and feeling bound in some way. So it's challenging, but we have to consider that like challenges aren't always bad. Challenges force us to reconsider different vantage points and different strategies and different things that could be possible. Whereas if we don't have challenges, we're just going to keep doing the same thing all the time, right? Like you might find the best drive ever because the road you've always taken home was closed, right? Like challenges aren't always bad. They're actually where we get to have like this learning curve with ourselves and where we can really up the ante. So when a challenge shows up in our lives, I really want to discourage people from falling into the mental trap of seeing it as some weird like punishment from the universe or some bullshit like that, because it's not. It's actually a way of help. It's like a teacher coming into your life and being like, I know that you can do so much more than what you've always done for yourself, and I am going to give you a challenge to show you that you are capable. You are so capable. So that's how I feel the energy of this is showing up in our lives and how challenges can be considered in a different way. And when we go from Jupiter, let's jump over to Saturn. Saturn has been in a conjunction with Jupiter for a while as well. And so that's where we've had, a big sense of responsibility in global change because these three have been together. Saturn is also moving into Aquarius and just moved into Aquarius. It doesn't move at the same speed as Jupiter because it sits at a little bit of an outer position in its orbit in regard to our sun and placement of Earth and that orientation. So during the time where Jupiter will go from 2 to 5 degrees Aquarius, Saturn will actually be just moving from 1 to 2 degrees Aquarius. And so it has a slower pace, and it's like reconsidering like our sense of responsibility and how we will move forward and what's actually practical and useful for ourselves. It's been in this square relationship as well with Mars because it's at a really close angle to Jupiter. Now, jumping from Saturn, we'll go over to Uranus. Now, I've already spoken quite a bit about what's going on with Uranus, but one thing that I do want to mention is that we've all seen big shifts to things that we've seen as stable in our lives for at least the last couple of years when Uranus shifted into the sign of Taurus. And Uranus goes through each zodiac sign in a period of 7 years. So it will be moving through this sign and creating changes and shifts in this area of stability in our lives, depending on what your rising sign is. It might show up in your area of relationship, it might show up in your area of job, it might show up in your area of friendships, spiritual search, etc. And that's what I'm going to be going into when we go into the zodiac readings. So that's something to consider and to not take the changes so personally, but see it as like, okay, the universe is encouraging me to step into a challenge and to see what I'm capable of. And so I'm going to just do it instead of being resentful and, whining about it. Because, I mean, we're all in a similar situation, right? Like, what good does it do us to fall into that pit of, so to speak, despair? So when we go to Neptune, Neptune is going to be pretty stationary, and as is Uranus. Uranus is retrograde, so to us it looks like it's actually moving backward in a way because it's moving so much slower than we are, and so it's actually going to be staying at 6 degrees during the next 2 weeks. Neptune will as well. It is an outer planet. It is going to be at 18 degrees as at the beginning of the full moon, which is on December 28th, and it will still be at 18 degrees on January 12th at the time of the new moon. But it will be affected by planets that are aspecting it. And then we have the most outer planet of Pluto, and Pluto will also be stationary during this time period of the next 2 weeks. But it will still be, having its transformative nature and its transformative aspect in regard to other planets as these other inner planets come into conjunction with it. So those are the movements of the planetary bodies for the next 2 weeks from December 28th, the time of the Cancer full moon, to January 12th, which is the time of the new moon in 2021. And so now I'm going to go ahead and jump into the different zodiac signs so that we can look at how this specific aspect of Uranus and this other aspect of Venus are showing up in your life.
Okay, so now that we've walked through each of the individual planets and their movements over the next couple of weeks, I wanted to check in with and show you where these energies are showing up in your life. And so I'm going to flash back over to the chart and spin it around depending on rising sign and speak a little bit more about how these different energies, specifically the Uranus, I'm pointing at my chart, the Uranus shift and influence as Mars aspects it, as well as the energy of Venus and its transition and aspecting into the position of being in Capricorn and having Mercury go through different conjunctions with both Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter, because I think those aspects are ultimately going to be affecting that Venus relationship that's going on. And because it's the time of the full moon, of course, I also want to look at where the full moon is starting and where it's going to be bringing about those reflections in our lives. So we're going to go ahead and jump over to the chart and take a look at that. Okay, so for Aries, Aries ascendant, as well as Aries sun and Aries moon, you're going to be experiencing these biggest shifts and changes in your sense of self and how this new perspective in seeing yourself ultimately changes your values around stability. Now, you've been undergoing a lot of changes around your monetary and the money area of your life and what you have on hand and the money that you have on hand. And for some of you, depending on what's aspecting Uranus, that might have been, more or less difficult for you. But having the planet of Mars go into conjunction with Uranus means that you're having a greater sense of self, actually like bring something new to those changes and those challenges, and you're seeing it almost as if
It's like, okay, this is an obstacle, and this is an obstacle that I didn't have any choice over, but I'm going to figure out how to get around it and how to move through it and how to bring something of myself to it rather than just be swept away in it. You're also experiencing, in the realm of Venus, you are experiencing a lot of compassion and I guess changes around relationships in your um, greater search and belief, as well as possibility in like the area of uh, big business and uh, travel, long distance travel, like big, further travel. And it's like you have this wish to do something, it could even be something like, you have this plan and you are going to be getting married, but you can't go to where you've always wanted to go. There's been this friction with Venus, which is our, the planet that rules our relationships, and it's been in this challenging relationship with this change, and it's also been in a challenging relationship with Neptune, which is all around, uh, kind of the deeper depths of things and karma, and also things that we might have some kind of illusions about. And so all of this is lending more wood to the fire, so to speak, of this new perspective that is coming about. And at first, we might feel really identified with the way that we've always had a sense of belief around things and our perspective of where we were going to go and our life path as, an Aries rising sun or moon. But this is ultimately shifting, and this is starting as Mercury is revisiting Pluto. Mercury was actually in conjunction with Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter on January 12th of 2020 when all of the big shifts happened. And so now we're seeing some of the beliefs that we've always had actually begin to shift and change because of these shifts that have been out of our control. And it is bringing something new to Venus, which is ultimately going to see a new energy within that shift and a new way to move within that shift, as if it is an opportunity that actually presented itself that wouldn't have if all of these changes hadn't taken place. So there's some big shifts happening in your area of career and life path and how you see yourself and how you see your sense of stability and how you ultimately value yourself. Because it's through challenges that we learn to overcome and we really get to gather who we are and what we're capable of. I send you a good wish. Now for Taurus rising folks, Taurus sun and Taurus moon, we have these greatest changes happening to your sense of self and who you feel you are and what motivates you and what puts you out and gets you out into the world. And it may be that something that you've always done in life has been really involved with the public in one-to-one situations, or in other aspects that were really dependent on that infrastructure that we had before that was very open. And now you're seeing this change in self and change of stability happen. And it started to happen, a couple of years ago when Uranus moved into this house. But now it's getting this additional energy of Mars, which is moving into conjunction with Uranus. And so we're having Mars, which rules the first house by nature, although it, is naturally ruled by Aries, which is in the first house. Not to mean to confuse you all, but if you have a rising sign of Taurus, Mars is moving into its natural house of rulership. And so it's bringing a a sense of confidence around this change and shift that's happening rather than feeling like you're lost in it. And so it's like a shift and a turning of things. And I think part of that is because of this shift that's happening up here with Saturn going into Aquarius for you and Jupiter going into this Aquarius with you, which is all about expansion around what you're actually capable of in career path. Like all of a sudden you see different opportunities for yourself. And that is because of this change that's also happening over here with Venus. Now, Venus has been sitting in a place of other people's money for you, as well as sex, drugs, rock and roll. And when I say like other people's money, I mean like loans, your partner's money, debts, things like that. And Venus is transiting out of that sign, and it's moving into the ninth house, which is a sense of understanding and learning and search for a higher truth. And it's also moving into areas that are, because its natural rulership is Jupiter. So it's also being affected by matters around new business ideas, new ideas for travel. Like perhaps you've always, like right now you're seeing a certain way around things and around the big picture as far as like your spiritual search goes, and you're kind of blinded in some way. But Mercury is going to be moving out of this aspect with the sun, and it will be going into conjunction with Pluto, which is going to be affecting the way you look at things in a transformative way. And then it will also be aspecting and moving, journeying into the 10th house for you, which is going to be end up in conjunction at some point in the next 2 weeks with both Jupiter and Saturn, which are bringing new ideas and a sense of help around your life path and your direction and your reputation and where you want to go with life and what you actually want to do with your life. So these changes, while they may have been difficult at first because they have affected the way you see yourself and how you've always identified yourself, it's actually moving some mountains out of the way so that you can step forward into a path that you might just be interested in exploring and that bring you some lightness to your heart. If you are a Gemini rising or sun or moon, this energy is going to be happening in regard to the Uranus and the aspecting in conjunction of Mars. It's going to be happening in your 12th house. So it may be that you've always had a really stable belief system in the realm of higher truth and higher understanding in your connection with God. And also, there may be some things that, you've kind of kept even at bay with yourself, like things you haven't recognized in yourself that have been even hidden from you, and things that are dissolving that you've always seen that have been some level of stability in your world. And so those things that are dissolving are bringing an opening for a conversation with your higher self, with God, with the infinite, so that you can connect to something and open up to new possibilities. Because when we grasp at the way that we believe the world is and it shifts, it can be really scary. And if it is shifting, often it is really helpful, at least I found for myself, to ask for help. And help, we have to consider shows up in a lot of interesting ways. You know, like help doesn't always show up in fun ways. Sometimes help shows up in really in ways that are rattling and that stir us in so many directions that we feel like we can get lost or fall. And there's also opportunity in that because it gives us an opportunity to reach for things and to open ourselves up for things that weren't possible because of how we grasped at things before. So we have to trust and we have to follow our instinct. And so this is, I think, a big lesson for you around trusting your instincts amidst change and not seeing, you know, outcome or where your position is in life materially as some kind of like, uh, you know, esoteric karma. You know, it's so many people see like good or bad, like what happens to ourselves as karma, which I think is a really tainted way of looking at karma. But that's a whole nother conversation. You know, we have to consider that everyone goes through trial and everyone goes through growth because of those trials, and that's not something to look at in a slighted and tainted way. That's something to look at as a way that we grow in life, and acknowledging it and you know, witnessing it and appreciating it and believing in ourselves because we can grow despite the things that we are faced with. And this is a new sense of relationship in this area amidst the change, instability that you've found in your life. So it's, you know, a big shift. And at the same time, you have this shift happening in your area of relationship and, you know, your businesses and your partnerships and one-on-one relationships, whether it's, you know, romantic or friendships. It's really close relationships, and it's been in this friction state because of this change for a while. But it's moving, and it's moving into a place where it's actually going to be shifting into a trying relationship with this change. And that's partially because of the new way that you're perceiving things because of the transformation that you've undergone, both monetarily, financially, you know, by way of like debts and what you've learned, and also things that you've learned in just like exploration through other realms. And then it's ultimately opening up a new relationship for you and a wider perspective around your sense of connection to your higher self and learning and understanding and ultimately like even possibly higher education and things that are going to open up totally new things for you because you just opted to change things up a bit while things were changing despite what we wanted to hold on to as stability. For Cancer, rising, sun, and moon, the moon is showing up in your first house. So the moon is bringing a lot of reflection in the areas of your sense of self. And Uranus is over in, where are you, Uranus? It's over here in your 11th house. And so you've seen a lot of changes to areas around your friends, and you've been reflecting on that quite a bit, as well as, you know, how you see things in the big picture. And this is starting to cause you to look and reflect on things that you need to let go of, things that possibly you always held on to as stability that aren't actually practical and useful for you anymore. And that is going to be brought about even more so with a stronger energy as Mars goes into conjunction with this relationship, because it's kind of like, well, if all this stuff is changing and I only have so much for this or that, like I'm going to put my time towards this and I don't have time for that. And it also brings a new sense of self and understanding around friendships, possibly that have, you know, like been stable despite shifts and changes in the world. Like, you know, like there's some friendships that just fade away for whatever reason, and then there are some friendships that for whatever reason always come back. And it's a recognition of like truly stable relationships and what that means and what that looks like in a, you know, in a bigger way, in a, you know, long-term kind of way, and where you actually want to put your time and your energy in regard to investing in those relationships, and which of those relationships have really helped you grow and which ones you want to nurture because you actually can acknowledge that. Then we see the energy of Venus, which is in your 6th house, and it's moving into your 7th house. Now, there's a matter, it seems, around relationships that's probably been going through some kind of transformation over the last year or so. And Venus is getting ready to visit this area. And it's as if she's approaching a house where she has all of these ideas around what she's going to walk into because of the changes that have been happening. And she ends up walking into that house and walking into this situation and realizing that these changes actually, like, she showed up in a way she never realized she ever knew she would show up. And it's actually bringing a transformation to how she interacts with relationships. And, you know, she or he, I just say she because I'm referring to Venus. But, you know, ultimately the individual I'm referring to could be she or he or they, for all that matter, with a Cancer rising or sun or moon. And so this is changing not only how you view this change that has happened in your area of relationships and partnerships and business partnerships, but it offers you an opportunity to let go of what hasn't worked so that you can put your energy toward what is really important to you. So this is how these energies are showing up in your life for the Cancer rising sun or moon. Now, if you are a Leo rising sun or moon, the Uranus energies are in the area of your 10th house. So it's likely that you had a really strong sense of stability in your career path and where you've been going in life and your reputation for a really long time. And when Uranus visited this house, everything started getting shaken up, and you've been trying to find your footing. And so having having Mars move into this house and actually go into conjunction with Uranus, it's like you're having a new sense of self, a new way of looking at things that's coming into, you know, it's like coming into perspective, it's coming into understanding, it's a new growth. It's like someone who's playing a game and they've always been able to go through and like win every game, and then now they have a game that's like fucking challenging. And as upset as they may be that everything is a lot more challenging, it gives us a lot more satisfaction to see what we're able to overcome and what we can actually like be inspired to like step into and create because this change and this shift happened. You know, it might be that like you always maybe went to the life that was stable, things that you thought were and would be stable, and there's some change that came in that like rocked that and has changed your perspective around that. So this energy is happening, and this energy is, you know, coming to light. And then we also have Venus, which is in your fifth house, which has been, you know, in your house of, you know, new love affairs and children, and perhaps like there's matters around children or creativity or things that you've been wanting to do that have been in a challenging aspect to Uranus, because Uranus is this changes that happen that really can be limiting to our creativity in some ways, and yet it's moving, like the Venus energy is transiting and is moving forward into Capricorn. So it's as if it's just a challenge. It's just like, okay, I have this creativity, I have this thing that I want to do, and this it's not I'm not going to be able to do it the way that I thought I was going to be able to do it. But you know what? I'll figure out how to do it anyway. Because in 2 weeks' time, it's actually going to be in a trine relationship with Uranus. And part of that is, as you know, this idea right now, like we don't really see things, we're like focusing on what's frustrating, we don't really see what's possible because we just see things as the same way, and we're kind of blinded in this conjunction. And as Mercury moves forward, and it's actually, you know, it actually moves into a square relationship with Uranus, we have this new understanding that's just like, okay, how are we going to see things? Are we going to see things in a, like, okay, this is a challenge. It's not delightful, but it's still a challenge and we'll get through it? Or are we going to see things in a, like, the world is punishing me kind of a way? And so Venus lends a very compassionate energy to Mercury in this aspect here, which is really kind of cool. Because it's that trine energy. And then we have the transformational energy of, you know, Pluto, which starts in a challenging relationship with Mars, which is part of that frustration, and then that shifts. Actually, Pluto stays where it's at. Mars is what shifts, and Mars is what brings this new change to Uranus. So let's see. Let's jump over to Virgo. So for Virgo rising, you're going to see Uranus and this change in stability show up in the area of your ninth house. So areas of teaching, higher learning, long distance travel, your ultimate search for higher truth. And so you're seeing these changes to stability happen for the last couple of years. But Mars is now bringing new energy to this house and a new sense of self. It's like, okay, well, now that I see that things are changing, I'm going to try to work the hand rather than have the hand work me. And so bringing a evolved sense of self to Uranus in these changes is like, you know, having a situation where there is a emergency and seeing a sense of self rise to the occasion and realizing that there's such a higher capacity for who you are and what you're capable of and what you can do than you realized because you didn't have those constraints before. So this is a, you know, it's like, okay, I'm going to do it differently now. I'm going to do it in this different way. And that may be a change to business, a change to teaching, a change to, you know, higher learning and long distance travel, all those different areas. We're also seeing the influence of Venus, which is going through the area of the fourth house for you, and it's looking at compassionately our traditions, our family traditions. It's feeling kind of jaded by what it wanted in ways, possibly of family instability in regard to how these changes have happened in our lives. But ultimately, it's going to be moving into a trine relationship and finding its way and finding a better way in this movement. And right now, while the situation may seem really difficult and hard emotionally, things are ultimately transitioning, and how we see things are transitioning as Venus transits out of this fourth house for you and into the fifth house. And so this will bring new changes and new opportunities actually for you in the realm of relationship, which is where there's been a lot of transformation and restriction in the last year or so for you. And perhaps something didn't work out that you had planned for, and yet this is opening up some possible opportunity in the realm of meetings or creativity or things that you can do, which reveals why this other thing has been a challenge and what ultimately why this change is going to bring a greater benefit than what you had perceived in the past. And part of that is in light of how you view things from a mercurial viewpoint and how that goes through this transformation period. And as it goes through this transformation period, we'll have, Venus moving into aspect with Uranus. Granted, when Mercury moves into that placement, it's not going to be in a trine relationship, it's going to be in a square relationship with Uranus. So how we view things may be challenging, and yet it's creating this change that's actually better for us overall, which is kind of interesting. So it's important how we look at things and seeing that help shows up oftentimes not in the ways that we think are the most ideal, but they ultimately and it ends up being for our greatest advantage in the long run. And a lot of that is going to lead into, for those of you who are Virgo rising, Sun or Moon, this transit of Jupiter. So Jupiter, as I had mentioned before, is a faster moving planet. And so when it's moving right now through this area of job and what you do for work, and it's going to be moving through this area pretty fast. It will be dipping into the area of your seventh house by the time of May, which is also when we're going to be having the last eclipse in the realm that we just had it in, which was in the same aspect. And so it will be rounding that up. So we may be, while something didn't work out, we'll be seeing why it didn't work out and what the better option was in why that didn't work out. And in some ways, it renews a sense of our belief system. But I'm just reminding you that because Jupiter is going to be aspecting this planet of Neptune in the next year and a half or so, and so there will be big shifts to the area of your relationships, even if you may feel as if you feel slighted right now. So just to give you a heads up and a note of encouragement. Now, for those of you who are Libra rising, Sun or Moon, the energies of reflection are happening a lot in your area of life path and your career. And it's being aspected and will be aspected by what you do on a daily, on a daily schedule. And so this reflection will be coming into trine relationship with that area of Neptune in just a couple of days, but then it will actually be moving into a square relationship with Mars, which is in your house of intimacy, your house of relationship, your house of one-on-one partnership, your house of one-on-one friendships. And so there's some friction between where you want to go in life and what you want in life in ways of partnership. And so this area that's been kind of like holding you back in some ways is moving into conjunction with Uranus, which has been changing your stability around, other people's money, sex, drugs, rock and roll. Maybe you were really limited in how much sex you could have in the past for some reason or another. And, you know, once you thought you could start doing that again, all of a sudden changes started happening in your life, whether it was like people or situations or for whatever matter. And this higher sense of self is like this sense of self is transforming and growing and starting to get a new understanding of what it actually wants in a sexual partnership, as well as where it wants to put its energies in other realms of exploration recreationally, whether like drug, alcohol, or otherwise, and what's useful. And so it's kind of like a bringing of a growing up and a sense of reflection of the other. And then at the same time, we have Venus, which is moving through your house of communication in your third house, and it's in square relationship to Uranus. So it's not like you're having the most pleasant conversations around these changes in, sexual partnerships. There is a lot of challenges in that area. Um, and then it's moving into Capricorn. Venus is moving into Capricorn at the same time as Mercury is moving into the fifth house. So it's likely that right now, how you see your foundations of home, and it's actually interesting because you have Capricorn sitting in your fourth house, and Capricorn is kind of a cold sign, and you have it sitting in your fourth house. So you have kind of like this very authoritarian mother relationship, and that is influencing your idea around relationship. And in some ways you don't even see that, and it's blinding in some ways. But Mercury is moving out of that conjunction with the sun and is moving into the fifth house, so that you can possibly start seeing things in your partner's point of view, or in whoever you're like, in relationship, or in, creativity, like your creative energy, your heart energy. Like you start seeing things in a new way, in a new compassionate way. And that mercurial energy goes through that transformation because it comes into conjunction with Pluto, and then it goes into conjunction with Saturn and Jupiter, and it has a new sense of responsibility, and it's bigger than what your sense of responsibility was. It's actually more compassionate because Venus has revisited that space. So that is for for Libra, rising, sun, and moon. And then for Scorpio, rising, sun, and moon, we have the energies of the moon and the reflection of the moon happening in your ninth house. So you're having a lot of reflection around your ideas around belief systems and your connection with your search and what you do for your search, like by meditation or church or religious faith, as well as other big things that, such as big business and long distance travel and teaching, as well as bigger studies and higher education. And so you could be reflecting on some of the things that you've learned over this last year, over the next, couple of days, and then continually to reflect on these areas of your life. Now, right now, it's quite likely that you may feel a bit frustrated emotionally in some ways, in like what you've wanted to do for work, because Mars has been in a square relationship with Pluto, and that relationship has been frustrating. There's been some kind of forced, you've had kind of a forced hand in the realm of work and what you do for a job, and what versus what you want to do, you know, and that's shifting. And you've also had a lot of changes around stability and partnership, whether it's romantic partnership or, you know, one-on-one friendships, close friendships, or business partnerships. And some stability in that area of your life has been shaken up over the last, you know, 2 years. And Mars coming into this house, the seventh house of relationships for you, is bringing a different, it's like bringing your sense of self to the change. Like, what can I bring to the table now that I know what changes are happening? How can I actually serve my partner in this change as well, rather than just primarily serving myself? Because Mars, its natural house is in Aries, which is it's where it's at, right? Which is all about me. And it's going into Taurus, which is in this square relationship and is moving, granted, out of square relationship with Venus, but there's something that's like, there's some change that's affected your sense of relationship that felt, you know, perhaps like you felt upset with how the other person was, and now you realize like you can bring something to the table too that will influence the situation. And when that happens, you know, big shifts can happen when we decide to shift in that way. Now, when we look at Venus, it's in your second house, so it's influencing your ideas of belief systems and what you value as far as belief systems, like what you value materially and financially. And you may value things that are more spiritual. You may value things that are primarily focused on, you know, big business and success, because you have Sagittarius there and you have this influence of there. But there's a sense of compassion that's coming to this. And right now, in this current moment of the full moon, there may be a sense of frustration and challenge in this area because of the changes that are going on, which, you know, is absolutely understandable. But it's shifting. It's shifting into a new way of understanding things in a new light, because Venus is shifting into the third house, which is your house of communications. And when you start talking about what's going on with you, you'll see that these changes have opened up doorways that you've always kept closed, because possibly you felt like you couldn't talk about things. You felt like it was really important to talk about things only in certain ways, or you've talked about things in a very authoritative way, or, you know, now you're starting to talk to people in a more compassionate way, and it's opening up doorways for you in regard to your expression with yourself. And that is a huge shift that is absolutely beneficial amidst all the other things that one may qualify as, you know, on the left or right side of, you know, the scale of awesome. Right? Like, things, you know, is it good or bad? I don't know. It's probably both. Everything is both. It may be upsetting to have our stability changed, but sometimes that change opens up doorways for us to express ourselves, as in particularly your case. And that will ultimately affect your home life. And as you know, gain a bigger perspective around the responsibility and what you bring to the table in matters around the home. Now, for Sagittarius rising, sun or moon, you have the energy of Uranus sitting in your area of your work. And so having Uranus sit in the area of your work, you may have had a lot of changes in your stability around what you do, and what your job was. Like, maybe you had a really long-term job and all of a sudden it was really upsetting, and you feel really upset around how that affects your sense of self, and it's really challenging around how you see yourself. And ultimately, in the next 2 weeks, we're going to have the additional energy of Mars going into the sixth house, which means that Mars is going to be adding its fire to this change, which means that you may decide that because you don't get to do the job that you have been doing for the last 10 years or however long you've been maintaining that job or that field of work, you may decide that you're going to decide to do something totally different. And it's like, all right, well, because I have to change, I might as well change for something that I really want to do or something that I've always wanted to do. And what does that look like? And it's something to possibly consider, like what you value, and choosing a job that actually will help grow and nurture what you value, whether it's a specific trade, or whether it's a medium of art, or whether it's engaging with people, or whatever area in life you feel genuinely called to that maybe perhaps you felt like you couldn't do because of some sense of responsibility. Now, Venus is sitting in your first house, and so this is bringing compassion to our sense of self and how we've always seen ourselves and where we thought we were going, because the first house is the I am, it's who we are, and having Sagittarius in this house is kind of like having a very strong spiritual outlook or business focused outlook or some sense of self that's connected to something that is bigger than just what's here, right? It's like higher education, higher learning, higher search, spirituality, big business, long distance travel. And so any of those things could be like where your sense of self is anchored in. And right now your sense of self is going through some challenges. And while Venus is going through this house, it's kind of like your own sense of compassion is being like put through the fire in some ways, even though your first house is ruled by fire. It's ruled by Aries, and you have Sagittarius in this house. Both of them are fire related, so they're in their natural rulership. But Venus doesn't like being put through the fire. Like Venus wants to be earthy. She wants to be held, and she's being kind of put through the fire right now. And it's because of these changes and shifts that are happening. And it's also, important to consider that things are moving, things are just temporary. So Venus is going to be moving out of this first house situation into the second house. So she'll be bringing a sense of compassion to your sense of values. And at the same time that she's going to be doing that, Mercury is going to be transiting and coming in conjunction with Pluto, which is all about transformation, about how we see things and what we value in life and our belief system. And then it brings in a new sense of responsibility and communication, because Mercury is going to be traveling into your third house of communication, which is usually, centered around big picture, but it will have had this energetic of what's happened to Venus as an energetic that shapes it in a lot of ways. So that's what people who have a Sagittarius rising, sun, or moon will be going through. And when that happens, Venus will be going into trine relationship with Uranus. And so it will bring a new sense of compassion to those changes that have been happening in the area of your work and what you do as a daily job, and as well as your health and things that you do to take care of yourself and preventative health. Now, if you are a Capricorn rising, sun or moon, you have the energy of Uranus showing up in your fifth house. So there may have been some kind of stability in the area of creativity that you've had, or some kind of stability in the area of matters around your kids, or new relationships. and matters around the heart. And there's been a lot of unexpected changes in this area, and now there's like something else that's leveling up to the table and bringing itself to the table, and part of it comes from tapping into possibly even like old traditions and your ancestry. As Mars comes into conjunction, it's not going to be in direct conjunction by January 12th, but it'll be moving in that direction, and so we'll be feeling the influence of this rising to the challenge and rising to the change, and it'll be in a creative way, or it'll be in a area around matters around children, or matters around new relationships, like a new way of approaching the challenges that you've been undergoing. Now Venus has been going through your 12th house, and so it's looking at things that, possibly having some compassion around skeletons in the closet for you, as well as having compassion for you around your own uh, like spiritual connection to God and relationship with God. And I'm not specifying any religion in that light whatsoever, um, but or source or the universe. Like you have Sagittarius naturally sitting in this house, which also is connected to that same realm as Pisces, which is, Pisces naturally rules the 12th house, which is the two fish, those parts of us that go both higher and lower. And so this is having compassion for, our search for ourselves within those two spaces. And there may have been some frustration and challenges in the area of, you know, children and new relationships and creativity, and something that kind of feels like, God's punishing me or something along those along that line. When in reality, like as I said before, like challenges are just meant to encourage us to grow. Like no tree stands and grows on a hill and says, like if this stone wasn't here, I'd be able to do this and this and this. It just grows around the damn stone. Like that's what we have to do. Just we have to grow despite our circumstances, and grow despite the challenges that are there. Like the challenges really are just fuel for the fire. And that's, I think, what you're coming to. And this is ultimately bringing for you a new sense of self, because right now, how you see things is kind of limited by how you see things, if that makes any sense. And how you see things will be going under a direct influence of Pluto, which is the planet of transformation. And so, literally, how you see things, describe things, speak about things will be going through a great shift, and you'll have a new responsibility in the area of how you value things and what you value because of these changes that are happening. And ultimately, that gives you a new understanding of compassion with yourself and your own ability to grow with challenges. So, I think you're doing awesome, and you need to recognize that and just give yourself some more, I guess, believe in yourself more, ultimately. Like, believe that you're capable and just try to find a way. And I know you can do it, and then you'll see that you can find a way, and it'll be awesome. So for Aquarius rising, sun and moon, you have the Uranus and shifts in stability happening in your 4th house. So this is matters around your home, as well as matters around your foundation. It could also be affecting areas around motherhood, your relationship with your mom, your relationship with your tribe, and your ultimate foundation of self and your stability around self. Like you may have always felt really anchored, and you have not felt anchored for the last couple of years. But something else is coming to the table now. Things aren't continuously just shaking up. Like now you're bringing a new sense of self that has been growing through these changes that can add something to it. And part of, where you may have felt frustrated in some ways is through communication, because Mars has been sitting in your third house of communication, and it's been in square relationship to Pluto. And so there may have been some conversations that you needed to have, or that you should have had, or that you felt like you should have had, that just haven't happened because of some kind of restriction. And this is going to change, and this is because something has weathered in you through that process of transformation and feeling restriction, that you've now learned that you need to approach it in a different way, and that possibly other people will be approaching it for you. Now, what's interesting is that this is going to bring about a change in your home, because you're bringing this fiery energy and the energy of Uranus, like, both into the area of your home and your foundation of self. So yeah, things are changing. Um, but at the same time, you're also going through this new, or not new, but you're going through a weathering process in how to understand things and how to look at things, because you have Venus going through your 11th house, which is all about wide horizons and big picture. And it's been challenged by these changes that have happened in communication for this last, maybe year, maybe two, I think maybe year for Mars. Um, but Venus is moving into trine relationship with that change. So there's something that's going to re-anchor in the family and in the home through the next 2 weeks. And that's with the new perspective, and almost like a dissolving of an old perspective that you've been having that you don't really see right now. And that's going to bring about an awareness and a transformation that will ultimately affect your sense of self, and how you see yourself and your responsibility, and how you show up in the world, and what motivates you and what moves you to interaction in the world. So I send you such good wish in those conversations and those shifts through the next couple of weeks, and as Uranus shifts through your fourth house. Now, finally, last but not least, we have Pisces, and Pisces rising, sun, and moon are looking at having this Uranus aspect happening in your third house. So there may have been some really big shifts and changes happening in the area of communication, as well as relationships with your siblings in the way of family members, and some kind of stability has really shifted and changed in the last couple of years. Now, it's getting the added influence of Mars that is going to be going into this house, and Mars has been transiting through the second house, and it's been in a hard relationship, and it's been in a square relationship with Pluto for at least the last couple of weeks. And Pluto is a planet of transformation, so there's been some challenges around our belief system, and where our sense of self is within that belief system for a little while. And part of that has been because of what's going on with Uranus in the third house, and possibly something that's been happening with either siblings, or in communications, or in some, realm of education, like lower communication, not lower like lesser communication, but elementary communication. Like, if you, like, for instance, like, perhaps you worked at a school, or your kids are in a school, and something's going on to education that's affected your ability and your belief system and how you are in life. This is now some aspect of yourself, because of these changes and transformations that have been happening in your belief system, and what you actually have on hand monetarily wise. This kind of refined and weathered sense of self is moving into the third house, and is starting to communicate about these changes. And part of that is influenced by Venus, because Venus is going into the 11th house for you, and it has a bigger view point. It has a wide horizon, and it can actually see things from a bigger picture than perhaps you've seen things in the past before. It doesn't take things so emotionally. It takes things I don't want to say like in a detached manner, because Venus isn't necessarily detached, but the 11th house can be, it's ruled by Aquarius, so it has that bigger viewpoint. It's far away. Nothing seems so personal when it's far away. And so there's some compassion in that, and recognizing that, and not taking those changes that have happened and those challenges and shifts that have happened in the realm of communication so personally, and actually showing up in a new way, and possibly like showing up for friends, because the 11th house is also associated with friends, and showing up for people in a new way because you are actually seeing things differently, because Mercury is going into a conjunction with Pluto, which is all about transformation, about how we see things, and then it will eventually be going into conjunction with Saturn, which is all about responsibility, and Jupiter, which is like the sun behind the sun. So it's like a greater help for God. So it's like learning a new sense of responsibility and stepping into that role and letting go of that in ourselves, which that doesn't serve us. And a lot of times that's how we actually see things. So that is the reading for today, for the next 2 weeks. Um, as far as the full moon in Cancer goes, through the new moon of January 12th. If you are interested in learning how these transits are actually going to be affecting your personal chart, I invite you to look at your natal chart in AstroDigest or astro.com and enter in their time of birth and your date of birth and where you were born, and it will give you a natal chart, and you'll be able to see your rising sign, your sun, and your moon, and it will give you more um, of an anchor in regards to how the information that I just shared actually will be affecting you personally. But also consider that when you were born, during your snapshot, in that moment that you took your first breath, whether it was 2:32 a.m. or p.m., the planets were at a specific position. And so where the planets are at currently in 2020 is going to also aspect those planets that you have natally as well. So in order to understand that, it's useful, if you don't understand astrology, to have an astrologer take a look at that. I can do that for you if you'd like, and I am taking clients right now in that regard. I also take clients to give them tarot readings, astrological snapshots for the next year, and also looks into their natal chart to help people work through different things. If you'd like any of those readings, you're welcome to reach out to me at rootsofalchemy@gmail.com. And also, if you find this information useful and you'd like to make a donation, because it does take a long amount of time for me to create these videos, I would greatly appreciate that. You are also welcome to send me any donation through PayPal at rootsofalchemy.com. If you have specific questions or would like more information on any particular area of material, whether it's astrology or tarot or nutrition or medicine making, keep in mind that I am a certified nutritionist, aromatherapist, and herbalist, and I've also studied astrology and tarot for a good number of years. So I'm here to teach you and help you out with whatever you'd like to learn. So just let me know, and I'll look to carving out the time and space to create that content for you. Aside from all of this, I send you a good wish and so many blessings during this full moon as we shift out of 2020 into 2021, which I think in some ways we've all been looking forward to, because we classify like year ends as new beginnings. And I guess it's just important to consider that we have these astrological shifts that are going through different time periods, like all of them, right? Like each planet is like its own anchor, and when they lock up and into sync, they can create huge shifts in what's going on with not only us individually, but us on a very global scale. And that's what's happening right now. So as we move through all of this, I encourage you to consider that you are much more capable than what you thought you were,
a year ago, and that you're even more capable than where you think you are now. And I send you so much love, and I will see you again soon. So much love to you.